"How bad is it?" asked the engines as Thomas rolled into the yard. "It's bad. The entire dockside is destroyed." "What about Cranky?" asked Douglas. "He's fallen over." Was anyone else hurt?" said James slowly. Edward. The engines fell silent. They all knew what this could mean. No one knew what to say. They couldn't get any words out. They all sat in silence together. At last, Toby spoke. "Is the fire brigade there?" "Yeah," replied Thomas. "They're on their way." Still there was silence. "You were very brave to go and look," said Gordon. "I knew I wouldn't have been able to do it." "Thanks." "Will Edward be all right?" asked Percy quietly. "I hope so," replied Thomas. "Who do you think is responsible?" asked Duck. "Isn't it obvious?" replied James. "Mr. Pauer's the prime suspect. We already know about the chaos he caused a few days ago." "But there's no way he would do something like that," said Henry. "This is a whole new level for him." Just then, Mr. Pauer ran over to the sheds. "There's been a terrible accident at the docks. We've managed to put the fire out, and we're cleaning up now, but it's quite a mess." "Sir," asked Percy, "is Edward okay?" "He's all right, but he'll need some major repairs." "And Cranky?" asked Duck. "He fell in the water, and we're getting him back up. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a lot of work to do." And Mr. Pauer hurried away. The engines felt a little bit better. "One of us should head over to the docks and see what's happening," decided James. "Right," said Duck. "I'll head over there." "Be careful, Duck," called the other engines. Duck slowly set off for the docks. "I hope Edward and Cranky are all right," he puffed to himself. When Duck arrived, he found Salty and Porter pulling Cranky back upright. Like Mr. Pauer had said, the fire had been put out, and some burnt trucks now lay alongside the track. Then, Duck noticed Edward loaded on some flatbeds in the sidings. He rolled on towards them. Suddenly, he heard a huge crash as Cranky's base hit the ground. "What happened?" asked Cranky as he looked around. "There was a huge fire, Mearty," said Salty. "What about Edward? Where's he?" "Over here," called Duck. "I'm taking him to the works." "Good," sighed Cranky. "Now, where did Bash and Dash go? I'd like to have a word with those two." "We haven't seen them since the fire started," said Salty. "They probably saw what happened and scurried off to hide." "Oh, that reminds me," said Porter. I have a job to do for Mr. Pauer." "What sort of job?" "You're needed here." "It's an important one, and I don't know what it is." Salty could tell something was up and wanted to find out what it was. "How do you know it's important if you don't know what it is?" "Because, Mr. Pauer said it was." "Well, perhaps I could help you. I've had my fair share of important jobs, you know." You can't really help with this. Mr. Pauer wouldn't like it. He has something else for you in mind." Salty was confused and growing suspicious. "You know what?" he said at last. "I think you're hiding something." "No, I'm not," Porter insisted. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do." And without another word, Porter rolled out of the docks. "I wonder what's going on," said Cranky from above. "Porter never got like this as far as I'm aware." "He never did, no. Although," continued Salty, "where did he go earlier today?" "What do you mean?" "Did you see him at all when the fire was spreading? One minute he was right here with us, and the next he just straight up vanishes. It's pretty strange if I do say so myself." "Maybe he got scared. Fires can be pretty intimidating." "Possibly, but I still think something strange is going on here," continued Salty. "I'm curious to know what the other engines are thinking." Salty left the dockside to talk to the other engines. Meanwhile, Duck had shunted Edward onto the repair track. The men began to examine him. "I don't know how well this is going to go," said Gordon. "He'll be all right," said Duck reassuringly. "Did he even speak on the way over here?" Oliver asked. "He didn't, but that's besides the point. The point is that Edward is a strong engine. He can get through this. We just have to stay positive." The engines knew Duck was right. Just then, Salty rolled into the yard. "Do any of you know what's been going on the last few days?" We don't know for sure, said Gordon, but we have some ideas. Who wants to know? Well, I do. Porter's been acting strange lately, and I have no idea why. Probably because he's one of Pauer's engines, sniffed James. What do you mean by that? We have reason to believe that Mr. Pauer is responsible, said Henry. Then he told Salty about what they had discovered. Salty could not believe what he had heard. You don't think he blew up the dockside, do you? He did, came a faint voice. Edward, cried the engines. What do you mean by that? Asked Thomas. The explosion didn't come from the crate of dynamite, Edward replied feebly. There was a van right next to me that blew up first. The explosion came from there and I landed in the sea. It's all too perfect to be an accident, he went on. The train I was pulling was bound for the docks. I had to go the long way because of an accident that had happened on the other line. It was all timed with my arrival. It had to be Mr. Pauer. He was planning to get rid of me. I just know it. The engines were in a state of shock. No one could believe that someone would stoop so low as to get rid of someone completely. We have to stop him, Duck said at last. He's gone too far. No one, and I mean no one, hurts our friends. We can't stop him, though. He's too powerful, said Thomas sadly. As much as I hate to say it, we're outnumbered. That's it, cried Salty. What is? Asked Thomas. Don't go after Mr. Pauer. It's his engines you want to go after. Run them off the rails, and then, well, Pauer becomes powerless. Salty nearly chuckled. The other engines were still rather nervous. Won't his engines hurt us, though? They're certainly a lot bigger than us, asked James. That's a risk we're going to have to take, said Duck. It's our only chance to take back our railway. The engines agreed. How many of us are left? Asked Thomas, looking around. I can only see James, Duck, Donald, and Salty. There still might be engines on the rails puffing around, said Salty. We could go and investigate. Thomas decided that that was a good idea, and so the two engines set off. They puffed along the line together, but they couldn't see any engines, not even one. Trains were left behind and were in the middle of the line. It's like a ghost town, said Thomas. Arr, agreed Salty. Then they came to a set of points. One track went along the main line and the other to Wellsworth. I think it's best if we split up, suggested Thomas. I'll head over to Wellsworth and you keep along the main line. Good idea, shipmates. And Salty rolled away. Thomas puffed along the track to Wellsworth. He was so busy looking around that he didn't see some flatbeds on the line. He crashed into them and they fell to the ground, taking a portion of the line with them. Oh dear, he exclaimed. I didn't mean to do... Hold on. What's that? Beneath the track lay an old lorry. It seemed to Thomas that it was carrying something. Driver, he asked, can you go see what that is? The driver got out and inspected the lorry. There's part of a bridge support in here, he called. Where did that come from? Wondered Thomas. The bridge collapsed when I crashed, but I don't know how or why. Henry! That must be it! I have to show this to the others. How do we plan on doing that? Asked the fireman. Easy. We just get a crane and lift it out. We should also fix the rails here while we're at it, I suppose. Come on, let's go! And Thomas sped away. The final stage of my master plan can be put into effect. For months I've been getting rid of these engines, and it's all come down to this. I can finally call this railway mine. All you engines have done an excellent job, and I'm proud of you all. Now, We did fail as I wasn't able to completely destroy Edward, but that doesn't mean all hope is lost. He is damaged, so he's out of the way for now. We need to get rid of the ones that remain though. They're useless to me. I want them gone. Once and for all. Porter and Hank, you two will be responsible for handling that diesel engine named Salty. I want him out of the way as soon as possible. Connor, Caitlin, and Timothy, you three will handle the others. This is our island now, and no one is going to stop me. Now go! Finish what we started! Back at Tidmouth, Harold the helicopter was getting ready to go to the mainland. "Why do you need to go to the mainland again?" asked James. "Don't you know what today is?" "No. If I did, I wouldn't have asked, you know." "Well, Sir Topham Hatt is coming home today." "He is?" cried the other engines. "This is perfect," cried Gordon. "When he comes back, Mr. Pauer will be stopped once and for all." "Or so we think," said Henry doubtfully. "We don't know what Mr. Pauer is capable of. How do we know he'll stop when Sir Topham Hatt returns?" "Well, seeing as it's his railway, Mr. Pauer has to stop being controller. He's only here temporarily, remember?" "I agree with Gordon," James chimed in. "The sooner our real controller is back, the better." "And that's why I'm getting him now," said Harold as he took off. "I hope Sir Topham Hatt is able to stop Mr. Pauer," said Percy quietly. "Why wouldn't he be able to?" asked Douglas. "It's like Henry said, we don't know what he's capable of." "He did threaten to scrap me," said Donald. "And he nearly destroyed Edward," sighed Duck. "You all need to stay positive," said Toby. "This is exactly what Mr. Pauer wants. If we're all afraid, then how can we stop him?" No one replied. "We need to stay strong. We can get through this." The engines knew Toby was right. "I certainly hope we can stop this," said Oliver. "We can." Just then Thomas raced back into the sheds. "You'll never believe what I just found," he cried. "Over by the sawmill, there's a lorry with part of a bridge support in the back of it." "You mean like the one I found?" asked James excitedly. "It could be." "Well, what do you plan on doing with it?" asked Douglas. "I'm gonna get it out from where it's hiding," Thomas replied, "but I'm gonna need some help." "I'll help you, Thomas," said James excitedly, "and prove to you all that I was actually right." The engines groaned as James puffed after Thomas. Meanwhile, Salty had finished searching the main line and was heading over to Wellsworth to look for Thomas. "Thomas," he called, "are you over here?" Then he saw Hank blocking his line. "Oh, hello there. Can you move, please?" "I don't need to," answered Hank. "What? "You are always weak," came Porter's voice. "I can finally take over the dockside and I'll get the work done twice as fast." "So this was your important job?" "Yes, and it's far from over." Sam and Mr. Pauer then steamed into the junction. "Ah, yes, the engine with many tales to tell winds up on his side. I hope you have a good story for this." "You won't get away with this." "I already have." Then they all heard a noise from overhead. It was Harold flying up above. "Where's he going?" Mr. Pauer demanded. "Isn't Sir Topham Hatt supposed to come back today?" asked Sam. "No! Stop him!" "What do you expect us to do?" asked the engines. "We can't fly. Divert him! Quickly now!" Hank and Porter raced away. "Come on, Sam. Our time is limited." "What shall we do with him?" asked Sam. "Same thing we did with the others," Mr. Pauer replied. At last, Thomas and James had arrived where Thomas found the lorry. "Can you see it?" asked Thomas. "It's right next to the building." "Yes, I do," replied James excitedly. "That looks like the exact same bridge support I found lying on the track by Wellsworth. But even if this lorry has the bridge support piece, how do we know Mr. Pauer put it here?" "That doesn't matter right now, James. This is more solid evidence that something is going on here. Now help me get this out." James agreed and the two engines set to work. Meanwhile, a few of Mr. Pauer's engines had gathered at Knapford. They were busy discussing Mr. Pauer's plans when Hank and Porter rolled in. "This is becoming ridiculous," cried Porter. "Why?" asked Timothy. "What's going on?" "We just had to chase Harold halfway across the island yelling at him to stop," sighed Hank. "And for what?" The other engines laughed. "Why would you go and do that?" asked Caitlin. "Because," answered Porter, "Mr. Pauer told us to. Isn't that why we're doing what we're doing? I know I wouldn't usually do this." "You're right," agreed Connor. "I always enjoy pulling the express, but I don't want to become its permanent replacement." "Me neither," added Caitlin. "Henry was such a nice engine, and he got run off the rails. It's such a shame. Gordon doesn't seem like a bad engine at heart either." "I felt so bad when I had to take James's train a few weeks ago," said Hank. "He must have been excited to pull it, but he broke down, so the station master asked me to take it." "Bill and Ben did cause a few accidents," said Timothy, "but they always made me laugh, even if they did make me have an accident." Mr. Pauer's engines began to think. Then they all began to realize what was going on. "We're bad engines," sighed Caitlin. "They never did anything wrong to us, and I think it's safe to say that we could call them friends." "Mr. Pauer's to blame here," shouted Porter. "Salty was such a hard worker, and Mr. Pauer had me throw him off the rails." "What do you suppose we do?" asked Connor. "I'll tell you what we do," answered Hank. "We're getting rid of Mr. Pauer and escaping his control." "Yes," agreed the engines. "What's going on here?" demanded Mr. Pauer. "You engines should be working, not chatting. We're running out of time. I need you all to finish the job now." And Sam steamed away with Mr. Pauer. The other engines were cross and agreed not to listen to him. "Steady, Thomas," called James. "Slowly does it." The breakdown train began to lift the lorry out of its hiding place, but they didn't get very far when... "Thomas, what are you doing?" "Oh no!" cried Thomas. "Not Mr. Pauer!" Sam and Mr. Pauer charged up the hill. "James, run!" And James did. It was then at that moment that Sam bumped into Thomas and forced him off the rails. "Well," said Mr. Pauer, "that was a lot easier than I was anticipating. Now no one can save you now, Thomas. Get me out of here." "Oh, is that what you want?" Mr. Pauer jumped down and flipped the switch. The sawmill fired up and Thomas started to move. "Now you'll be gone once and for all. This will cut you clean in half," Mr. Pauer laughed. Then he climbed back up and he and Sam left. Thomas was very worried. "Oh, help!" he cried. "Big problem, big problem, big problem, big problem, big problem," cried James as he raced into the yard. "What's going on?" asked Duck. "Mr. Pauer, Thomas, sawmill, in danger," panted James. "Take a breath, James," said Donald. "Tell us exactly what happened." Sam and Mr. Pauer pushed Thomas into the sawmill. "What?" cried the engines. "We have to help him," cried Donald. "But it's too dangerous," insisted Duck. "Might we be of some help?" came a voice. Caitlin rolled onto the turntable. "We know Mr. Pauer's plan for you all, and what he's up to." "And why should we trust you?" asked James sharply. "Well," said Caitlin, "the way I see it, you really only have two possibilities. Either you let us help you and we take down Mr. Pauer together, or you take him on by yourselves." James and the other engines began to realize that their decisions really were limited. At last, Harold the helicopter returned with Sir Topham Hatt. "Wow," he said, "just look at this place. It looks like a hurricane swept through here." Then he noticed Thomas in the sawmill. "Harold," he cried, "down there!" Harold landed in the field and Sir Topham Hatt hurried over. "Thomas," he cried, "are you all right?" "Sir," cried Thomas, "oh, thank goodness you're here. I need you to stop the sawmill, and fast." Sir Topham Hatt wasted no time. He ran over and flipped the switch just as Thomas was about to hit the blade. "Phew," sighed Thomas when he opened his eyes. "That was too close for comfort." "I agree," said Sir Topham Hatt, mopping his forehead. "Let's get you back on the rails." Meanwhile, Sam and Mr. Pauer were traveling down the main line. "Just a minute, Sam. I need to speak with the signalman." Mr. Pauer got out and walked into the signal box. As he did that, Sam looked up ahead and saw that there was a lot of Mr. Pauer's engines sitting on the points outside Knapford. Donald, James, and Duck were among them. Sam went to investigate. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "No engines can pass," Hank replied sharply. "Stuff and nonsense. I'm Mr. Pauer's engine, so I'm allowed anywhere." "That means absolutely nothing," Donald burst out. "Oh, it does," continued Sam. "You see, I'm bigger than all of you, I'm stronger than all of you, and I'm better than all of you, especially you Brits." The engines held their ground. "There's nothing you can do to stop me." "Think again, Sam," called Timothy. From the tunnel, he and Porter raced into the junction with a very long train of trucks. "You can't go anywhere if your line is blocked," said Porter proudly. "Well, isn't that a shame?" replied Sam sarcastically. He raced backwards and forcefully knocked a few trucks off the line. "You really thought this would stop me?" He then shoved Porter off the line as well. "You engines are so weak," he said as he charged forward, shoving Timothy into Connor. "Stop that!" shouted Donald. "Why should I?" Sam asked slyly. "What's an engine like you going to do?" Sam crept forward onto Donald's line. He was so busy gloating that he wasn't paying attention to what he was doing, or where he was. "You best mind your position," Hank said. "Shut up," snapped Sam. "There's nothing you can do to stop me." "Oh, really?" Hank suddenly shot forward and pushed Sam right off the line. "You may be better than us," laughed Donald, "but we're far more clever." "You'll pay for this," cried Sam. "When Mr. Pauer gets here, you'll be sorry. Do you hear yourself? Look what you've done." Sam looked around at the mess he had caused. "Those were your friends, your kind, and you ran them off like it's no big deal. You're a steam engine at heart, not an enemy of destruction." "What's it matter? Mr. Pauer's my controller, so I do what he says and what's best for him. This was an attack against him, so I remain true to my purpose." "This isn't your purpose," Hank cut in. "Your purpose is to pull heavy goods trains along the line, not to run your colleagues off the rails." "It doesn't matter," shouted Sam. "What matters now is that you and all the other engines here are done for." "So you think," said Hank, and he tried to back away, but soon realized that he was derailed as well. "Oh, help!" he cried. "Don't worry, Hank," said Caitlin. "We'll get—" Oh no. What? Mr. Pauer's coming! "Retreat!" shouted Duck. "Quickly now!" "Wait!" called Hank. "What about me?" "I've got you!" shouted Donald. He coupled up, but he couldn't pull Hank back onto the rails. "I need help!" he whistled. "I'll help!" called Duck. He too coupled up, and together they managed to get Hank back onto the rails. Donald, Duck," answered Connor. "Sorry, Connor, there's no time," said Donald. The cavalcade cleared the station as quickly as they could and ran into the quarry. "We should be safe here," panted James. "Not yet, we're not," said Caitlin. "Max, Monty, we need your loads." Max and Monty quickly raced over and dumped their loads of stone on the crossing in front of Caitlin. Byron then rolled over. "You're not to clear this line unless I say otherwise. Understand?" "Yes," answered Byron. "Don't worry, Caitlin. I won't let you down." Caitlin smiled. Duck, Donald, and James were very impressed. Meanwhile, Mr. Pauer had arrived at the junction. "What on earth happened here?" he demanded. "Sam, what is going on?" "They attacked me, sir. All of them." "We'll see about that," fumed Mr. Pauer. Just then, Butch rolled past. "You there! Stop!" "Yes, sir." "I need you to get Sam back onto the line." "I can't right now. I have to go help sir." "No, you're helping me now!" Butch was cross but did not want to argue, so he reluctantly set to work. "What is taking Butch so long?" wondered Sir Topham Hatt. "He should have been here by now." "I don't know, sir," said Thomas, "but there's a possibility that Mr. Pauer might have stopped him." "Well, I'm not waiting to find out. We need to find some other way to get you onto the line." "Might I be of some help?" came a voice. Terrence the tractor had rolled into a field close by. "I could pull Thomas back onto the tracks." "It's worth a shot," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Thank you very much, Terrence." "Happy to help, sir. Welcome back." The tractor climbed onto the tracks and got into position, ready to haul Thomas back upright. Meanwhile, Butch had finished pulling Sam back onto the rails. "Come on, Sam," called Mr. Pauer. "Let's go take care of my so-called engines." Sam rolled along the line to the quarry. There he saw the blockage. "You really think this will stop me? You've got to be joking." Sam puffed forward and pushed some of the stones aside as if they were nothing. "You engines are a disgrace! I will scrap all of you as soon as I get my hands on you!" After a lot of hard work, Thomas was back on the rails. "Thank you, Terrence," he called. "Not a problem at all, Thomas," Terrence replied. "Be careful out there," and he rolled away. "What exactly is going on around here?" asked Sir Topham Hatt. "It's quite a long story, sir." As quickly as he could, Thomas tried to explain everything. Sir Topham Hatt was furious. "We need to stop that man as soon as possible," he demanded. He jumped into Thomas's cab and together they set off. "Oh my," said Thomas as they rolled into Knapford. "What happened here?" "Thomas," called Timothy, "is that you?" "It is indeed." "What is going on?" asked Sir Topham Hatt. "Who are these engines?" "We were brought in to help by Mr. Pauer. You must be Sir Topham Hatt. It's a pleasure to meet you, sir." "Not yet, it isn't. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "We do," interjected Connor. "That's why we've been trying to help you." "Help? You think destroying my railway and engines is helping?" "With all due respect, sir, we realize what we did was wrong, which is why we teamed up with your engines to stop Mr. Pauer. We know where they are." "Oh, you do? Where are they?" "At the quarry, although you have to be careful," warned Timothy. "Sam ran us right off the rails. He won't hesitate doing the same to you." "Thank you for the warning," said Thomas. "Come on, sir, we'd better hurry." Sir Topham had agreed and they set off again. "I can't believe my own engines would turn against me like this. I can't believe you're helping the enemy. My engines are loyal, faithful, hard-working. You are nothing like that. You are no longer my engines. You are the enemy. Now I'm going to—" "Stop right there," came a stern but familiar voice. "Sir Topham Hatt!" cried James. "What?" shouted Mr. Pauer. "Mr. Benjamin Pauer, what do you think you're doing?" You're terrorizing my railway and destroying my engines. I'm here to take back my island and put a stop to this nonsense. The passengers are probably up in arms because there are no trains. This is a railway, not a playground." "It's my railway now," shouted Mr. Pauer. "There's nothing you can do to stop me. You're far too late. Ha ha!" Mr. Pauer hopped into Sam and began to back him up. "Run, Thomas!" cried the other engines. Sir Topham Hatt scrambled into the cab and drove Thomas back as fast as he could, but there was more trouble up ahead. "Stop right there," said Bash. "You're not going anywhere," added Dash. "That's right," said Ferdinand. "Mr. Pauer will be so pleased that we caught—" But before they could say anything else, Sam backed into the junction and completely knocked Bash off the rails. "Leave him alone!" shouted Mr. Pauer. "He's mine!" Ferdinand and Dash scampered off. Thomas and Sir Topham Hatt saw an opening on the line close by and made a run for it. "After them!" Mr. Pauer shouted and drove Sam forward. "That man is insane," said Sir Topham Hatt. "We need to stop him." "Yes," agreed Thomas, "but how?" Mr. Pauer, however, was the least of their concerns. Up ahead lay trouble. The track by the docks had only recently been repaired, but the support wasn't strong enough to hold the weight of an engine. Cranky saw Thomas coming. "Stop!" he yelled. Sir Topham Hatt applied the brakes, but too late. "I've got you now, and right where I want you." "Oh no!" Sam and Mr. Pauer stood on the line, blocking the way. "And now to do what the sawmill should have done. I'm going to destroy you once and for all, and your worthless controller." Mr. Pauer went to back Sam up so he could get a good run at Thomas. "You're a steam engine at heart, not an enemy of destruction. You're terrorizing my railway and destroying my engines. Your purpose is to pull heavy goods trains along the line, not to run your colleagues off the rails." "Are you ready, Sam?" "No." "What?" "I'm not doing this. This railway is not yours. You're going too far with this. I'm okay with helping you, but this is crossing a line." "Sam, you're my engine, so you do as I say. Now let's go." "No." Sam began to fight back and Mr. Pauer could not make him move. He furiously pounded the regulator, but Sam fought back even harder. "It ends here," cried Sam. Mr. Pauer was so busy trying to get Sam to move that he didn't see Bulstrode pulling up alongside Thomas. He also didn't see Sir Topham Hatt jump aboard. Sam, however, did see this. He looked at Thomas, who took a deep breath, knowing what was about to happen. "All right, sir," said Sam. "You want to hit Thomas? You've got it." "What? No!" "Bust my buffer, Sam!" cried Thomas. Just then, Mr. Pauer's head popped above the surface. "Help me!" he cried. "I can't swim!" "Hold on just a minute," snapped Bulstrode. "You think you can cause all this destruction and expect us to help you like that? I don't think so." "Please," begged Mr. Pauer, "I'll do anything. Just save me." "If we help you, you'd better give up your plan and put things right, or you will be sorry." Mr. Pauer agreed and was helped into Bulstrode. "Now, Mr. Pauer," said Sir Topham Hatt sternly, "you've caused quite the amount of chaos on my railway. I want you to tell me everything you're responsible for." "Yes, sir," replied Mr. Pauer quietly. "When I first arrived, I wanted to turn your railway into an all-American railroad. The best way I saw was to simply have mine slowly take over. So I brought in all my engines from America. However, seeing as your engines were not too welcoming of all of this, I had to take more drastic measures. The first real accident I caused was Henry's. I was the man who drove the lorry into the bridge support that caused the track to give way. I knew I had to hide it, so what better place than tucked away next to the sawmill. I never noticed the remains of the bridge supports though, as I figured all of it was just on the ground. I had nothing to do with Percy's accident. I'd seen the accident record for this railway, so I knew I had to luck out eventually. I only got lucky with him and James. I purposely derailed Sam on the crossing so Douglas would crash into us. It worked like a charm. After I realized the sheds were filling, I needed to find more space to store the engines. So after James's crash, I started to send the engines away. One by one, my engines derailed and eliminated your engines. I then placed the stone on top of Gordon's Hill for Toby to hit, and also weakened the bridge for Oliver. When I saw Edward had found my truck, I knew he was way more clever than I anticipated. So with some clever planning, I started to achieve some very explosive materials. There was a bomb inside one of the vans that Edward would pull up next to so it would destroy him. I knew Bash and Dash would help make it look more like an accident if they crashed into some fuel tankers, so I had them race around the island. Once I saw Cranky hit the bridge support, I waited things out and it worked beautifully, except Edward managed to tell the others what happened. After my engines betrayed me, my plan slowly crumbled and the events unfolded just as you saw. Sir Topham Hatt was furious and immediately took Mr. Pauer to court, where he was sued and arrested for destruction of property, human endangerment, and attempted murder. After that was taken care of, Sir Topham Hatt had a stern talk with Mr. Pauer's engines. "I know all of you were brought on by Mr. Pauer and were only doing what he told you. However, I do not approve of that sort of behavior on my island." The engines looked at the track in disgrace. "But I'm also aware that you tried to help my engines and stop that insane man, so you deserve another chance. Now, as you may or may not be aware, I'm in a tight spot right now and can't afford to keep all of you, so I will be watching you all closely and will determine who gets to stay. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir," said the engines. "We will work hard." "That's good. Now there's a lot of work that needs done." Mr. Pauer's engines set to work. They took all the engines who had been damaged to the works to be repaired. With the help of some of Mr. Pauer's engines, Sir Topham Hatt managed to locate all the engines that had been sent away. They were all brought back to Sodor and were soon back in working order. The engines worked together to fix the damage that had been caused. They repaired any broken tracks and lifted derailed cars back onto the line. Even Sam was lifted out of the water. A few months went by, and at last the engines began to return from the works. All of Mr. Pauer's engines who were damaged rolled into the docks. "Thank you for repairing us, sir." "You're welcome," said Sir Topham Hatt. "I hope you will work hard." "Yes, sir, we will, sir." Then they puffed away. Just then, Henry and Gordon rolled in. "They did a wonderful job with you," cried Sir Topham Hatt proudly. "It feels good to turn my wheels again," said Gordon happily. "I agree," added Henry. "This new coat of paint is absolutely wonderful." "Make way for a splendid engine! It's so nice to be red again." "I thought you liked being painted black," laughed Gordon. "I most certainly did not. Red is the only proper color for an engine." "Actually, James," said Duck as he rolled in, "I would never want to be painted red. I like my green paint." "I agree," said Oliver. "Green is the best color." "Pah!" snorted James. "Everyone knows that the only color for an engine is red." "If that's the case," laughed Thomas, "then why is the number 1 engine blue? Or the majority of the engines here green?" asked Percy innocently. "Is James going on about his red paint again?" asked Toby. "Well, some things never change, I suppose." "That's enough," laughed Sir Topham Hatt. "You all look splendid. Now off you go to work, please." The engines whistled in agreement and set off. Just then Donald and Douglas puffed in, followed by Murdoch. All were very pleased to be repaired, but Sir Topham Hatt was surprised. "You weren't repainted?" he said. "No, sir," laughed Donald. "We don't need to be freshly painted to be really useful." "Aye, working parts all we need," Douglas agreed. "Excellent," replied Sir Topham Hatt. "Your work ethic is marvelous. Murdoch, how does it feel to be back on track?" "Well, sir," he said, "to be quite honest with you, it's different." "What do you mean?" "I had actually been getting used to being crooked after staying that way for several months." "Well, in no time things will be back to normal again." Murdoch smiled and set off to do some work. For the following weeks, everything ran like clockwork. Eventually, Sir Topham Hatt called all the American engines to Knapford Station. "As you all are aware," he started, "you've been on trial for the past 2 months, and I am pleased to say that I finally made my decision on who will stay." He paused impressively. "Connor and Kalen, I understand your work with the Express has been good, so I will be having you run fast passenger services to and from the mainland." The 2 engines were delighted. "Thank you, sir," they whistled. Sir Topham Hatt turned to Porter and Timothy. "As for you 2, I understand that you worked very hard at the docks and quarry, and your performance since I've been here has not disappointed me. Therefore, I will allow you to stay as well." Timothy and Porter smiled. "Hank and Rosie," Sir Topham Hatt continued, "your enthusiasm to get the job done is outstanding, and you 2 will make fine additions to my railway." "Oh, yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir." Sir Topham Hatt then turned his attention to the logging locos. "As for you," he said sternly, "you 3 have been nothing but trouble. I know all about your involvement with the fire earlier, and the fact that you almost had Thomas and I captured did not help with my impression of you at all. Therefore, I will not be allowing you to stay. I have found another railway willing to take you, so you will leave next week." The 3 engines were silent. "We're sorry for all the trouble we caused. We'll make the most out of our new home." "That's right." Sir Topham Hatt just sighed and then looked at Sam. "Oh dear," thought Sam, "he'll send me away for sure. I'm not pleased with you at all, especially with your attitude towards my engines." Sam felt very ashamed. "But," he continued, "for risking your life to help stop that insane individual, I have come to the realization that you might not be so bad after all. Not to mention that I'm also in need of a strong engine to help with the goods work." "Sir, are you saying—" "Yes, Sam, I am." Sam was delighted. "Oh, thank you so much, sir. I won't let you down." "Good, but I will be watching you very closely. Do I make myself clear?" "Yes, sir. Understood." Sam was as good as his word. He worked very hard to keep the trains running on time. The other engines were very impressed. One day, he arrived at the docks to find a large group of engines waiting for him. "What's going on?" he asked. "We don't know," said Toby, "but Sir Topham Hatt is going to tell us now. Ladies, gentlemen, and engines, as you may all be aware, all of my engines have returned from the works a while ago, except for one. The engine in question, of course, is Edward the Blue Engine. Now I have here an update from the works where he is being repaired, and I have a feeling that you all deserve to know what's going to happen." The engines began to worry. No one liked the sound of that. "Sir," asked Percy quietly, "is Edward going to be all right?" "Well?" "Edward!" whistled the other engines in delight. "Hello, everyone," he called. "It's great to be back again." "You look as good as new," said Gordon. "How'd they do it?" "The people at Crewe work wonders. I'm so happy to turn my wheels again." "And we're happy to have you back," smiled the engines. "Excellent. I can't wait to pull trains again." "Well, come on then," said Percy. "There are some coaches waiting at the platform." And they puffed away to do some work. Sir Topham Hatt was left alone. He looked around and smiled. "Yes, indeed," he said. "It most certainly is good to be back."
His name's Sir Topham Hatt. Some people say he's stout, rather rotund, really quite round, but he doesn't see it like that.
He considers he's a gentleman of merit,
with a railway exquisitely fine.
But his main aim is to see that his trains run right on time. Sir Topham Hatt, he's the head of the railway, there is no doubt about that. Controller of the line, it's plain as plain can be, for everyone to see that it's the fat controller's railway. Sir Topham Hatt, he's the head of the railway, there is no doubt about that. Controller of the line, it's plain as plain can be, for everyone to see that it's the fat controller's railway. The fat controller's railway. Sir Topham Hatt.